For the second year, Semafor is out with its annual breakdown of the biggest political hits and misses of the year. And joining us now to take us through the Americana Awards is senior politics reporter for Semafor, David Weigel. Dave, it's great to see you. I feel like I should be in black tie for this award ceremony, but this will have to do at this hour of the morning. So let's get right into it, starting with the best winning campaign, talking the non-candidate division. Who was it this year?
Oh, that was the Ohio Coalition for Reproductive Freedom, the people who really twice in August and then November won by double-digit margin these abortion referenda. And Republicans, I should say social conservatives in coalition Republicans had a year to figure out a strategy. They tried everything. They tried linking it to gender surgeries. They tried warning that with ballot language is a little bit inaccurate how far-reaching this would be. It didn't work. You had at this point one of the most efficient operations in center-left politics are these pro-choice campaigns, and this Ohio one was probably the most effective we've seen.
And as you point out in the piece, August, there was that first run to sort of stop the way constitutional amendments are made. That was one run at it, defeated by 14 points, and then the amendment itself defeated by nearly the same margin. Let's move to best winning campaign, talking about an actual candidate here and an incumbent governor.
Yes, that was Kentucky's Governor Andy Beshear, who started the year with a lead. He was the top priority on defense for Democrats, on offense for Republicans. Republicans had Attorney General Daniel Cameron, a rising star in the party, who had to navigate a tough primary, but won it pretty easily with Donald Trump's endorsement. And you had, in a red state with very bleak mood about President Biden's approval rating in some parts of the state in the single digits, Beshear able to win and expand his margin from 4 years ago, and he did so. There's going to be a theme this year. He did so for a number of reasons. He talked about the state's economy, but he also talked about abortion rights. And he had what I thought was the most effective ad of the year, about a woman talking about her very gruesome, unpleasant personal experience with abortion, really befuddling Republicans who were on the hook defending a statewide total abortion ban. So good campaign, blocked and tackled, did all the right things, and also came up with messaging that I already, within hours of the campaign, was seeing other Democrats try to copy in other states.
Dave, we'll revisit that ad in just a moment, a little later in this awards show. But let's continue with the honor roll here. Best winning campaign challenger division. Tell us who it is and why it matters.
Yes, it was Jeff Landry in Louisiana. He's somebody who did not make a lot of national news this year, just for the dynamic that if somebody's winning by a lot, they don't get the same coverage. But this is a campaign that very early on organized to replace John Bel Edwards, the popular outgoing Democratic governor of Louisiana. Started with a simple message about, I'm the Attorney General, I'm a former cop, I'm going to crack down on crime, specifically in the big urban precincts, big urban parts of Louisiana, big urban parishes, and did a combination of that outreach to Republican voters and outreach to black voters. He had very effective early ads directed at black voters in Louisiana who do not vote Republican mostly, about how crime was affecting them. Black victims of crime talking about why they supported Jeff Landry. Just the kind of very efficient, base expanding, I should say, not just electorate expanding, but pulling in people who don't vote Republican normally. Very efficient campaign of the kind we did not see a lot of in 2023.
Dave, you have best losing campaign. That doesn't often get a good mention. So you've picked the Glenn Youngkin effort to win back the state legislature in Virginia. Now, this is something I paid attention to because I was, there was worry among Democrats that he had a 15-week abortion ban that he was sort of putting the campaign for Republicans behind. And there was concern that if that was succeeded and he was succeeded in capturing the Senate that the Democrats controlled in Virginia, that this would mean that a national, in a state like Virginia, pretty blue-ish, a little tint of purple in there, that would mean that moderate position, that this could be perceived as a moderate position that would do well in 2024 for Republicans across the board. So I looked at this as a loss, but you're giving Youngkin credit for almost winning. So explain why you think that was significant.
Yeah, there's a little bit of the holiday spirit going on, but I'm trying to also correct. I think there was a lot of obituary writing for the Youngkin effort after they narrowly lost these elections. They lost the State House of Delegates by 1 seat. They lost the Senate by 1 seat. That involved them losing seats in the House of Delegates on a new map. The reason I say it was an effective campaign is because they won every seat in both houses that voted for Joe Biden by less than eight points. So they won everything that was Republican. They really came very close to the Youngkin 2021 margin. And again, I'm comparing this to what Republicans were doing around the rest of the country. Outside Louisiana and Virginia, there was not much overperformance. They were losing in suburbs. They lost some mayoralities in Indiana and other parts of the country where they were feeling confident. In Virginia, they were able to come close to build this Youngkin coalition of MAGA voters and some suburbanites, not just around D.C., but around Richmond in Tidewater region. They were able to do that with hey, we are Republicans. We're going to improve the economy. We also do not want to ban abortion. Democrats say we do. We don't. We want a 15-week limit. Because they lost, there was not much of a conversation about how effective that was. It was fairly effective. It did, and I talked to Republicans afterward, it did encourage them that you can run in a swing House seat with a version of this message in 2024. They were outspent in the end by Democrats. I think they were hurt, frankly, by all the presidential speculation around Youngkin. You had very wealthy donors saying, we need Glenn Youngkin to win these elections and then run for president. Even with that complication, which scared up tens of millions of dollars for Democrats, they again, ran way ahead of their baseline, close to 2021. It was like the rest of the election, the Dobbs decision wasn't happening in Virginia. It just wasn't enough for them because it was such a Democratic state.
All right, as we move to best campaign ad, we come back around to one you've mentioned already from Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky. It's titled Unthinkable Around the Issue of Abortion. It is a stunning ad. Let's watch it.
I was raped by my stepfather after years of sexual abuse. I was 12. Anyone who believes there should be no exceptions for rape and incest could never understand what it's like to stand in my shoes. This is to you, Daniel Cameron. To tell a 12-year-old girl she must have the baby of her stepfather who raped her is unthinkable. I'm speaking out because women and girls need to have options. Daniel Cameron would give us none.
Dave, so that's Hadley Duvall. She's 21 now, talking about her experience when she was 12, being raped by her stepfather. And that really echoed well beyond Kentucky. She sort of, in many ways, became the voice of this abortion rights movement nationally.
Yes, and that format of ad is one we've seen a lot of since 2022, since the Dobbs decision, is Democrats finding a woman who can tell a personal story. There's not a rebuttal from somebody else. There's not a third narrator. The candidate's not even featured in it, apart from endorsing the ad. This is, I think, the most effective version of it we've seen, because in Kentucky, like I said, it's one of these states that had a ban ready to go if Roe was overturned, and you had an Attorney General, Daniel Cameron, running for governor, who had defended the total abortion ban. I was saying at the top of the segment, it wasn't just this ad was effective and it humanized the issue. It totally scrambled his strategy. He started to say, well, maybe he was open to some exceptions if the legislature would pass them. He denounced the ad, but it wasn't quite clear what he was denouncing. He didn't have a good answer for Democrats, or really for the electorate, on how situations like hers would not happen. I think a dynamic we've seen all year is that the Republican line on abortion for a long time, at least since 2016, has been, well, Democrats want no limits. No limits means abortions up to the 9th month. It means abortions on the table after a baby's born. What Democrats say is, well, look at what is actually happening in a total ban situation. You have the contrast of a story that is happening. You saw one out of Texas after the elections. And look at the fantasy Republicans are talking about of a healthy pregnancy being terminated in month 9. That's not a thing. That's not a thing that happens. It's not a thing that generates stories. These stories are real. And it's not just that Democrats are good at running ads about them. They're realistic that this is happening in America. It is something that horrifies those voters who maybe they've got 5 or 6 reasons they might vote Republican for parts of the ballot. Maybe they're angry about inflation or whatever. But on this issue, they know that Democrats are not in favor of total bans. And that really has been enough for Democrats to hold and take back a lot of ground across the country this year. Again, with the president's approval rating in the dumpster in a lot of these states.
And you're right, Daniel Cameron, the Republican candidate there, had no good answer for that ad, because what could you possibly say to Hadley when confronted with that? Dave, stay with us if you can. We love this list. We want to take a quick break and then bring everybody the worst campaign ad of the year. We'll be right back on Morning Joe.